Ooh, ooh, ooh. Hi everyone, Oothany Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Father John Misty album, God's Favorite Customer. This is the latest full-length LP from singer-songwriter Josh Tillman, aka Father John Misty. Copper Tone Winfrey? No. Proper Drawn Whiskey? No. Farmer Don Henley? Shut up! Shut up. Okay, I thought about killing you today. I thought about killing you. I've also thought about killing myself, and I love myself. So I have no issue with thinking about killing you. You're so mean. I was just joking. What's wrong with you? So this is Tillman's fourth full-length LP, and it's his follow-up to what was my album of the year last year, the Father John Misty record, Pure Comedy. A record that was a fantastically grim piece of social satire with a lot of wit and balladry and heart. However, a lot of other publications and listeners didn't so much seem to think so, finding the album and Josh Tillman's performance to be very bloated and dreary and kind of pretentious. And I will admit, this album, I love it, but it is kind of a slog. But, you know, hey, an ode to humanity's path of self-destruction takes time. So how do you follow up such an album, a record that is easily your most epic and ambitious artistic statement to date, and yet it wasn't really all that well received by a lot of the people who loved your previous material? I will say though, in Josh's defense on this album, there were several lyrical nods to people not taking to this new direction. It's sort of sad to see the album going underappreciated, but surely he was aware of what was going to happen here. In the end, it would have looked sillier to see Josh predicting underperformance for this album in the face of great fanfare. Now, unfortunately, Josh's answer to the follow-up question with God's Favorite Customer, to me, is kind of play it safe. Go back to more direct song lengths and don't get so political. Revisit themes that fans enjoyed so much more on previous releases, like relationship issues, humorous character portrayals, a few playful nods to God and religion. It also wouldn't be a Father John Misty record without him going super meta at least a few times and kind of breaking down the fourth wall. But I will say, even though Josh has decided not to go all out on this latest record, he mostly does maintain the same grand instrumental presence that Pure Comedy had. The track list on this thing has a great flow, a very strong start, a lot of dark ballads matched with very appropriate pick-me-ups to kind of add balance. And even though this record is not as loaded with social commentary as its predecessor, I kind of see it as an equally grim release, which sees Josh exploring some incredibly dark corners of his mind on tracks like Please Don't Die and The Palace. And if there is a thematic thread that pulls a great deal of this album together, it's that. It's Josh's mental state, it's depression, it's substance abuse, it's how these things are affecting his marriage. And it's also suicide. With lots of lavish instrumentation, more straightforward tunes, and a more personal focus lyrically, no doubt this album is going to appeal to a wider array of people, and it seems like the reception and the reviews so far reflect that heavily. But really at what cost? Because while I like this record quite a bit, I also kind of feel like I'm being pandered to. I don't know exactly what's driving it. Is it the lack of breathing room between this record and its predecessor or something else? Either way, it just kind of feels like Josh is simply going back to what he already knows works, what he already knows the audience receives well. As some of the tunes on this thing just feel kind of typical for Josh, because when it comes to the instrumental palette, the aesthetics, some of the melodies, chord progressions, I get a lot of musical deja vu on GFC. It's just kind of unfortunate that Josh wasn't able to drum up a more distinct sound and personality for this album, given that thematically it's very different from everything that he has released previously. Sure, while Josh has addressed issues like depression in the past in song, this record feels like it's trying to be more of a deep dive into his psyche. I mean, this is the first Father John Misty album to have Tillman pictured right on the front cover, and that's mostly because he is the subject of this record. And not just in the sense that Josh is playing the narrator or a character in his own song. I mean, the tracks on this thing feel more like a meta-analysis or an autopsy. So while I embrace the thematic direction Josh is going in on this thing, there are moments where the sound of this album leaves me feeling like I'm listening to a meager but personal extension of his last album. Or there are moments on the album where I feel like he doesn't really nail it. He fails to bring the audience a truly unique view on the issue. Of course, there are still highlights all throughout the album, though. The song Mr. Tillman is dark, it's charismatic, it's hilarious, it's well produced. It's sung from the standpoint of like some hotel lobby employee expressing concern for Tillman's erratic and strange behavior. I love the folk rock guitars and drums and heavy piano on this track. There's some beautiful vocal layers on this track too, and a very smart nod to singer-songwriter Jason Isbell. The song Just Dumb Enough to Try is another favorite of mine on here and features these dramatic and beautiful piano chords and acoustic guitar arpeggios. The track is essentially about Josh's mental and emotional issues driving a wedge in the relationship between him and his wife, with a lot of the lyrics of this song portraying Josh as inadequate as a partner, as a lover. The song is essentially an emotional build-up to Josh kind of gaining the courage to get his shit back together, try to make this thing work, and essentially start his life again. I thought the song Date Night was pretty great too, despite it being such an oddball in the track listing. It's a short vignette-sized piece of folky desert rock with kind of lo-fi drums that sound panned all the way to one side, high-pitched vocal harmonies that sound like something out of a Queens of the Stone Age song. In between these moments, Josh delivers this kind of deadpan talk singing where he's really on his Lou Reed shit. The lyrics read a lot like a funny, surreal trip or something, which kind of shows the duality of Josh's mental state on this record. You have these blissful, abstract highs and then plenty of lucid, dejected, depressing lows. Please Don't Die is a beautiful ballad, but also really harrowing as well, as the song is sung in part from the standpoint of his significant other, basically begging him not to kill himself. The song is pretty powerful and all about the devastation she would feel if she were to lose him. In a lot of ways, the track reminds me of that Smoochie cut from Pure Comedy last year, which was essentially about Josh's wife comforting him or kind of, talking him back from the ledge whenever he would be in a depressive state. The genius and gorgeous title track on this thing sees Josh kind of addressing his religious background, acknowledging that he's pretty much lost touch with it, but then coming back and calling on it in order to, I guess, find some sort of sanctuary from the mental and personal demons that he's dealing with. He's calling on God in his time of need, reminding God that, hey, I was really religious way back when. I was your favorite customer. There is a wonderful vocal performance from Wiseblood in the last leg of the track. She sort of comes in, provides this really angelic and haunting background vocal to Josh's tune that is really one of the highest points on the record. Now, with all that being said, there are a few low points on the album for me as well. I didn't really like the track Disappointing Diamonds at all as a teaser. It makes a lot more sense in the track listing because it sounds like a very peppy segue moment, but I still find the very boomy and maxed out instrumentation and falsetto vocal harmonies to be a really hideous sound. I do give the track points though for having incredibly interesting lyrics though, where Josh is essentially singing an ode to flawed love, talking about how something perfect or that lasts forever probably isn't that special anyway. Songs like The Palace and The Songwriter I'm a little conflicted with. Musically, I feel like Josh is treading water, but I do enjoy the sentiments, the messages of these songs. On The Palace, Josh essentially portrays himself as being holed up in a hotel room, doing drugs, being afraid to leave. But I feel like the sadness and the tension of this moment doesn't really come through in Josh's performance, outside of the very weary vocal delivery that he has on board when he sings that being in over his head refrain. Overall, to me, the song just feels like a mild snapshot of what could have been an incredibly interesting and manic moment on the record. The songwriter as well, to me, musically feels a little uninspired, a little drab, but again, I enjoy the lyrics, I enjoy the sentiment, the concept of the song. Josh getting down to the crux of fame, performer, subject, artist, addressing his wife as his muse and kind of throwing this hypothetical out there where what would happen if we switched places? Would you be as honest and constantly mining our relationship and our private life for source material for your music in the way that I do? In that sense, the song seems almost like an apology for throwing the intimate details of their life out there in his music. And Where Only People is such a painfully flaccid closing track. The lyrics during the first leg of this song are easily the most uninspired on the entire record, like, "People, what's the deal?" It reads like a Jerry Seinfeld stand-up routine and basically gets to the heart of almost nothing. You've been hurt, I've been hurt, what do we do now? I feel like Josh was addressing these exact issues on his last record, but in such greater detail. It feels like there's something here, but whatever it is, Josh isn't really getting at it, and it feels like he's not even trying to, like he's dumbing it down for the audience or something. I think the last few stanzas of the song are pretty poetic, but it just kind of feels like too little too late at that point. There are some subtle suicidal themes on the track as well, so I guess that kind of ties in with the rest of the record too. But the track just feels like a cliffhanger with no incentive to stick around for part 2. Overall, I like this album quite a bit. There are a lot of great tracks on it, but I can't help but feel like Josh is punching under his weight a little bit. It's not quite as focused or fulfilling as it could have been. The concept is a little too disheveled. Despite some of the very heavy and personal topics of this record, occasionally it feels like Josh is just scratching the surface. It's not amazing, but it's very good, and very good by Josh Tillman standards. An above average Josh Tillman album is still going to be leagues better than most of what you find in the singer-songwriter field these days. And even when playing into expectations, he still manages to come through with a lot of great tracks. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Just leave a comment in the comments if you're feeling full of thoughts. Hit the bell as well when you sub. Over here next to my head is a video you can check out. Do that. And I love you. Anthony Fantano forever.